Lily and Grace were on their knees scrubbing the spotless floor of a sleek office, never realizing that billionaire CEO Jack Mercer was quietly watching them from behind his desk. When he finally broke the silence and asked why they were there, the answer struck him harder than anything he'd ever faced, and it changed everything. Morning light poured in through the tall glass windows, throwing sharp beams across Jack's modern desk. His empire, one of the most powerful tech companies in the world, was built on drive, precision, and a cold calculation of profit. Jack Mercer was a man who had no time for distractions, no patience for emotion, and no interest in anything that didn't add to the bottom line. His spreadsheets were his world, and that world moved at the speed of success. At 42, Jack had everything most people only dream about: a fortune that could buy entire towns, a mansion overlooking the ocean, and a reputation as the man changing the face of technology. Yet despite the money, the power, and the endless accolades, his life felt hollow. The higher he climbed, the less he could connect with people. Friendships had become shallow. Relationships were purely transactional. Everyone he dealt with was either an employee, a client, or an obstacle to remove. He had built everything for one reason: control. But even with the skyline beneath his feet, there was a gnawing emptiness inside him, something missing, though he couldn't name what. Work kept him moving. Work kept him from thinking too much. Across the city, in a cramped apartment tucked into a neighborhood that seemed worlds away from the polished towers of downtown, 12-year-old twins Lily and Grace stood side by side in front of a mirror. They shared more than just a birthday. Their bond was quiet but unbreakable, the kind of closeness only twins could know. They understood each other's moods, fears, and dreams in a way no one else ever could. But this morning wasn't about dreams. It was about survival. Their mother, Anna, had been sick for weeks, an illness that left her bedridden and frail. Lily and Grace had always pitched in with chores, but this was different. With Anna unable to work, bills stacked high and rent past due, the girls had to step in. Anna had spent years cleaning offices for wealthy clients around the city. That morning, too weak to move, she whispered to her daughters to take her place. "It's only for today," she said softly, her voice cracking. "You'll be fine. Just do your best." But the truth was, the girls didn't have a choice. Their mother's illness had drained what little savings they had, and without her paycheck, they couldn't keep their home. Their world, once full of schoolwork, laughter, and childhood dreams, was suddenly replaced with worry and the crushing weight of responsibility. Lily adjusted her faded cleaning uniform, staring at her reflection. Fear mixed with determination in her eyes. Grace tied her apron with steady hands, her face set with the same quiet resolve. They didn't need to speak. They both knew this wasn't just another job. This was their only chance to keep things together. "For Mom," Grace said under her breath. Lily forced a smile and nodded. "We'll be okay." The girls slipped out of the apartment in silence and caught the bus downtown. The ride dropped them in front of one of the tallest buildings in the city, a giant of glass and steel that seemed to cut into the sky. They pushed open the heavy glass doors, their footsteps echoing across the marble lobby, the world around them polished, expensive, and far removed from anything they'd ever known. Taking the elevator to the top floor, they stepped into Jack Mercer's office. They had cleaned here before, but today felt different. There was a heaviness to it, as if their mother's words had marked this as a turning point. They set down their supplies and got to work. The sound of Lily's mop gliding across the floor echoed softly in the quiet office. Grace wiped down the gleaming glass tables with careful precision. Their movements were efficient, but there was tension in the air. They weren't just cleaning for money anymore. They were cleaning to survive. They had just begun dusting the main conference room when Jack walked in. At first, they didn't notice him. They were used to office workers coming and going, security guards offering a quick nod before moving along. But Jack wasn't like them. He stood silently behind his desk, simply watching. It wasn't until Grace lifted her head and spotted him that she froze. A flicker of unease crossed her face. "Do you need something?" she asked softly. Jack didn't answer right away. His sharp eyes scanned their worn clothes, their tired expressions, the way they seemed to move with both caution and urgency. They looked like kids carrying a weight far heavier than they should. Finally, his voice cut through the silence, smooth but commanding. "Who are you?" The question seemed simple, but something in his tone made them stiffen. His gaze felt like it was peeling back the careful masks they wore, seeing straight through to the struggle underneath. Lily stood, wiping her hands nervously on her apron, suddenly aware of how small and out of place they seemed in the gleaming office. Her throat was dry, but she forced the words out. "We're here for Miss Anna. She's sick." Jack's brow creased. "Anna," he repeated, recognition flickering in his mind. He knew the name, Anna, the cleaner who had worked for him part-time. Always polite. Always professional. But he'd never met her children. He'd never thought about them. "That's right," Grace added, her voice trembling but stronger now. "Our mom's been really sick. We're just helping her today." Jack studied them for a long moment, his eyes narrowing like he was piecing together a puzzle. The twins shifted uncomfortably, cheeks flushed with a mix of embarrassment and nerves. They weren't looking for pity. They weren't looking for sympathy. They just needed to finish the job. But Jack couldn't ignore the way something inside him shifted. He had been told about Anna's illness, yes, but he hadn't expected this. Two young girls stepping in, carrying the burden their mother couldn't. It wasn't just their presence that unsettled him. It was the quiet desperation that hung over them, the kind of weight he recognized but hadn't felt in years. He let out a soft sigh, surprising himself. It was almost like exhaling after holding his breath far too long. He looked at them, then turned toward the massive window overlooking the city, his hand tightening on the edge of the desk. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he muttered, more to himself than to them. The girls exchanged a confused glance. "Tell you what?" Lily asked quietly. "That your mother was sick. That you needed help. Why didn't you say something?" The question landed heavy in the air. Jack Mercer, the man who never asked about anyone's problems, was asking theirs. The twins stared at him, unsure how to respond. What kind of help could he really offer? And truthfully, they weren't sure they wanted it. Pride ran strong in both of them, too strong to reach out to a stranger, even one as powerful as Jack Mercer. "We're fine," Grace said quickly, though her voice wavered. "We don't need help. We're just here to do the job." Jack could see right through their brave front. He noticed the sag in their shoulders, the slight tremble in their hands as they went back to work, the exhaustion they couldn't quite hide. He had seen that kind of struggle before, the way people tried to mask pain behind forced determination. And it hit him like a weight in his chest. These girls weren't just scraping by. They were fighting for survival. Something stirred in Jack, something he hadn't felt in years. A sharp pang of guilt. A helplessness he couldn't explain. And beneath it all, an unexpected urge to do something. Anything. He started, but the words faltered. He had spent years solving problems with money and power. He could buy solutions, negotiate outcomes, and control nearly everything in his world. But this wasn't something a check could fix. Clearing his throat, he said instead, "I'll be in my office. If you need anything, let me know." The twins didn't answer. They just watched him leave, his footsteps fading into the hall. Only then did Lily and Grace release the breaths they'd been holding. They glanced at each other but said nothing, then bent down and went back to cleaning. Still, something had shifted. The man who owned the building had actually noticed them. Seen them, not as background noise, not as faceless workers, but as human beings. And that awareness felt heavier than anything they'd carried before. The days that followed blurred together. For Lily and Grace, life went on as usual, cleaning offices, caring for their mother, and trying desperately to keep their fragile world from collapsing. They didn't run into Jack again, at least not right away. But his question kept circling in their minds. "Why didn't you ask for help?" It wasn't just what he said, but the way he said it. There had been a sincerity in his tone, something genuine, something they hadn't heard from anyone in a long time. and it unsettled them. Lily, always the practical one, pushed the thought aside. She focused on their work, on keeping things together. They didn't need help. They never had. They'd managed this long, and she refused to admit weakness. Grace, though, couldn't shake it. His words echoed in her mind late at night as she stared at the ceiling of their tiny bedroom. The idea of accepting help from someone like Jack Mercer felt wrong, almost shameful. She didn't want to owe anyone, especially not a man who lived in a world so far removed from their own. And yet, deep down, a quiet voice inside her wanted to believe. Wanted to believe there might be more to life than endless struggle. On the third day, Jack appeared again. The office was quieter than usual, the normal hum of activity replaced by an odd stillness. Lily was polishing the windows, sunlight streaking in through the glass, while Grace sorted supplies in the corner, trying to push away her restless thoughts. This time Jack didn't just stand in the doorway. He walked in, each step echoing across the empty room. "You're still here?" he asked, his voice softer than before. Lily straightened, tension stiff in her shoulders. "We have a job to finish," she said evenly, keeping her tone steady. Jack's gaze lingered on her, and there was something different in his eyes this time, something almost human. He glanced at the gleaming surfaces they just cleaned, at the care and purpose in every move they made despite the burden they carried. "I noticed you weren't here yesterday," Jack said after a moment. His voice was lower, thoughtful. "I thought about what you told me, about your mother. And I wanted to ask if there's anything I can do. Anything at all." Lily's grip tightened on the mop handle. Grace shifted uneasily, avoiding his eyes. For a long moment neither girl spoke. The words were too heavy to say. "We're fine," Lily said finally, her voice firm, though it shook at the edges. "Thank you, but we don't need anything." There it was, the wall they had built. The pride that shielded them from admitting their fears, from risking the vulnerability of leaning on someone else. Jack didn't argue. He simply watched them, the silence hanging thick between them like fog. His expression softened, touched with something that looked almost like regret. But he didn't press further. Instead, he gave a quiet nod. "I understand," he said, turning toward the door. Then he paused and looked back at them. "Just know, the offer stands. You don't have to carry everything alone." His words were simple, but they hit Grace like a blow. She turned quickly, blinking hard, unwilling to let him see the way her eyes stung. Lily felt it too, the pressure of his offer weighing down on her chest. They weren't ready to admit it, but the truth was undeniable. They were tired. Tired of pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. Tired of shouldering their mother's illness, the bills, the endless strain. When Jack's footsteps faded, the silence he left behind was deafening. The twins stared at the door long after he'd gone, their world of self-sufficiency suddenly feeling fragile, like it could collapse at any moment. The days slipped by in their usual blur, cleaning, exhaustion, uncertainty. They told themselves to forget Jack's words, but they lingered anyway. Asking for help still felt like defeat. And yet life had a way of forcing change when you least expected it. It was late one afternoon when everything shifted. Lily and Grace were finishing up in the lobby, sweeping floors and dusting counters, when the familiar rhythm of footsteps echoed across the marble. They didn't need to look up. They knew it was him. Jack Mercer. But this time, he wasn't alone. "Lily. Grace." His voice carried across the quiet lobby. "I need to talk to you." They looked up, surprised. Jack stood there not in his usual immaculate suit, but in slacks and a plain shirt. He held a stack of documents in one hand, his expression more tense than usual. Behind him, two men in sharp business suits hovered silently, their presence heavy and watchful. The twins exchanged a quick glance, then set aside their cleaning supplies. Grace's heart sped up. Something felt different, urgent. This wasn't just another casual encounter. Olivia, always the protector, stepped slightly in front of her sister. "What is it, Mr. Mercer?" she asked carefully. Jack's voice carried a weight they hadn't heard before. "I need your help with something." There's been a change in today's schedule. I have a meeting with investors, and I could use extra hands in the office. It's important. The twins froze. Jack had never asked them for help like this, not directly, not with such intensity. You want us to clean for your meeting? Grace asked, confusion etched across her face. But we're almost done for the day. No. Jack shook his head, almost impatient. Not cleaning. I need you to help organize some files in the conference room. Just for an hour. That's all. Grace's stomach tightened. Something about the way he said it unsettled her. His voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before, not commanding, but almost uncertain, as if asking for help didn't come naturally to him. Lily, ever the practical one, placed a reassuring hand on her sister's arm. It's just an hour, she whispered. Then to Jack, she said with a small nod. We'll stay. We'll help. Grace nodded reluctantly, her eyes flicking back to Jack. The tension in the air was undeniable. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about sorting papers. He was holding something back, something important. All right, Lily said, keeping her voice steady. We'll help. But just for an hour. Jack let out a breath of relief. Thank you, he said quickly, then motioned toward the conference room. Follow me. The twins exchanged a look before trailing after him. Their footsteps echoed down the hushed hallway, the fluorescent lights above humming as shadows stretched long across the floor. The building that usually buzzed with constant movement now felt unnervingly still. When they reached the conference room, Jack gestured for them to sit at the large polished table. Please, he said quietly. Just sit. I'll explain in a moment. Lily and Grace slid into chairs on opposite sides, their unease growing as they noticed two businessmen standing near the window, whispering to one another. Jack didn't seem bothered by their presence. His eyes were fixed only on the twins. I need to be honest with you both, he began, his voice lower than usual. I've been thinking about your mother. And the more I do, the more I realize there's more happening here than I first understood. Lily frowned. What do you mean? Jack hesitated. His gaze flicked to the two men, who had stopped whispering and were now watching him closely. He ignored them, focusing on the twins instead. I've realized your situation is worse than I thought, he admitted. And I can't just sit back and pretend I don't see it anymore. Grace blinked in confusion. What are you talking about? Before Jack could answer, one of the men by the window, a tall figure with graying hair, cleared his throat. Mr. Mercer, he said firmly. We've reviewed the numbers. If this partnership doesn't go through, profits will take a serious hit. We need your decision now. Jack's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod. Still, his eyes kept straying back to Lily and Grace. For the first time, they saw something in him they hadn't expected, a crack in the polished armor. Vulnerability. I need everything ready before this meeting, Jack said, his voice sharper now. But when his gaze locked onto the twins, his tone softened again. And I need you two here. You're the only ones I trust to get these files in order. Can you do that? Lily's chest tightened. This wasn't just about paperwork anymore. His request carried weight. Personal weight. Of course, she said quickly, forcing herself to sound calm even as her emotions churned. She didn't understand why he needed them here, but she knew one thing: they couldn't turn away now. Grace hesitated, fingers drumming nervously against the edge of the table. She had no idea what Jack was really pulling them into, but she could feel it, the tension rising between them. Something was shifting, and it scared her. The door clicked shut as Jack took his place at the head of the table. For the first time, the twins felt the walls closing in. There was no hiding here. No pretending they were invisible. They were part of this now, whether they wanted to be or not. The conference room buzzed with silence, broken only by the low hum of the air conditioning. Jack sat at the head of the table, his eyes darting between the businessmen by the window and the girls sorting through piles of documents. The weight in the air was suffocating. Lily shuffled the stack of papers in front of her, trying to focus, but her thoughts kept circling back to Jack's words. There had been something vulnerable in his voice, something raw that unsettled her. It wasn't the polished CEO speaking to them, it was someone else. Across the table, Grace's hands trembled as she adjusted the files. She felt everything more deeply than her sister, and right now, the tension in the room pressed on her like a stone. She could sense that Jack's request was about more than papers. Something about him had shifted, and it left her uneasy. Leaning slightly across the table, Grace whispered, "Do you think he's telling the truth?" Her voice was so soft only Lily could hear. Lily looked from her sister to Jack, who was murmuring with the businessman again, then back. "I think he's trying," she admitted. "But I don't know what for. It feels different." Grace bit her lip, unconvinced. Jack's sudden change of behavior, his insistence they stay, unsettled her in ways she couldn't name. Was he being genuine, or was it just another mask? Before Lily could answer, a knock came at the door. The receptionist peeked in, her voice hesitant. "Mr. Mercer? You've got a call." "It's your mother." Jack froze. His shoulders tensed, the practiced air of control slipping for just a moment. He rose quickly and moved to the door without a word. But before stepping out, he turned back, his expression tight. "I'll be right back," he said, his voice strained. "Keep working on the files." The door clicked shut. Lily and Grace exchanged a glance. The shift in the room was instant, as though they had just glimpsed something private. Something raw. The look on Jack's face hadn't been one of power, it had been pain. As the minutes crawled by, they went back to organizing papers. But the silence between them was different now. Heavier. "I don't think we should be here," Grace murmured, eyes downcast. "He's not like anyone else we've worked for. I don't understand what he wants from us." Lily paused, letting her sister's words sink in. She knew Grace wasn't wrong. Most people they worked for never even noticed them. But Jack did. He saw them. Heard them. Tried, even when he didn't understand. That alone made him feel different. And unsettling. "I know," Lily said softly. "I don't get it either. But maybe we shouldn't keep shutting every door. If he's really trying to help, maybe we should let him." Grace shook her head fiercely. "I don't want to owe anyone anything. Not even him." Lily understood. Pride had kept them afloat all these years. Asking for help had always felt like weakness. But something about Jack Mercer's world, about the way he carried his own hidden weight, made her wonder. Before she could say more, the door opened. Jack returned, his face carefully composed, though his eyes betrayed strain. He sat back down slowly, his movements stiff. "Everything okay?" Lily asked cautiously. He hesitated. Then his eyes softened. "It's my mother," he admitted, his voice quieter than they'd ever heard. "She's not well. I've been trying to hold everything together, but..." His words trailed off. The twins exchanged a look. "I'm sorry," Grace whispered. "We didn't know." Jack gave a small, weary smile. "Don't be sorry. No one knows. I've just been carrying too much, trying to do it all alone. And I shouldn't have." His confession landed heavy in the room. For the first time, Lily and Grace saw him for what he was, not just a powerful CEO, but a son, a man trying to balance the impossible. And in that moment, they realized Jack Mercer wasn't so different from them after all. The room sat in heavy silence, Jack's admission weighing over all of them. Lily and Grace exchanged a quiet look, still trying to process what he had just revealed. For the first time, they saw him stripped of his armor. The confident, controlled man who always seemed untouchable was suddenly human, fragile, hurting. It wasn't just his mother's illness that struck them. It was the way he bore the pain alone, as if he didn't know how to share the weight with anyone else. For that moment, words weren't necessary. Something in the atmosphere had shifted. For the first time, the twins didn't see Jack Mercer as the powerful CEO. They saw him as a man trying desperately to keep his world from falling apart. And in that way, he was no different from them. Jack's eyes lingered on Grace. She hadn't spoken much, but the quiet empathy in her gaze pierced straight through him. For the first time in years, he felt a connection with someone, not born out of duty or obligation, but something deeper. Something real. Then Grace spoke, her voice soft but steady. "You don't have to do this alone." The words surprised Jack. They surprised her, too. She hadn't planned to say them, but they slipped out before she could stop herself. Jack's expression softened, his voice lowering. "I don't know how to ask for help," he admitted. "I never learned. I've always known how to handle everything else, but not this. Not her." His voice broke, and he dropped his gaze to his hands as though the weight of his truth was too heavy to carry. Lily shifted in her seat, her chest aching with an emotion she hadn't expected to feel for him. She had seen need before, neighbors, strangers, her own family, but this was different. Jack wasn't simply asking for help. He was reaching across the divide between his life and theirs, trying to understand. "I know what it's like," Lily said softly. "To feel like you have to do it all on your own. It's not easy." For the first time, Jack drew in a breath that didn't sound like it was strangled by pressure. "I don't know how to balance it anymore," he confessed. "I've poured everything into the business, into being in control. And now, I don't know if it's too late to make things right." His eyes searched theirs as if begging for an answer. A quiet pause filled the space. The skyscrapers outside, the wealth, the empire, it all felt small compared to this moment. "Maybe it's never too late," Grace whispered. Lily's lips curled into the faintest smile. "We're all just doing the best we can, Jack. No one has it all figured out. And you can't carry everything on your own. It's okay to ask." Jack swallowed hard. His eyes shone with an emotion he wasn't used to letting anyone see. "No one has ever told me that before," he admitted. "I've been so busy proving I could handle everything myself, I never stopped to think about this. About you." A sigh escaped his chest, shaky and raw. "I don't even know how to repay you, for helping me, for just being here." The twins exchanged a glance. In that instant, it felt like something had shifted in the universe. They weren't just cleaners in his office anymore. They were part of something bigger, woven into the unraveling threads of Jack Mercer's life. "You don't have to repay us," Lily said gently. "Sometimes, just being here is enough." Jack nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on them. "Maybe I've been chasing the wrong things all along," he murmured. "I thought success was power, control. But I'm beginning to realize it's about connection. About people." His eyes landed on Grace. "And I think I've been missing that all this time." The room softened around them, losing its sterile corporate feel. Something human had bloomed in its place. Grace finally spoke again, her tone calm, carrying a wisdom well beyond her years. "We all need someone sometimes. Even you." Jack smiled then. A small, fragile smile, but genuine. It looked almost like relief. He glanced between the sisters, gratitude flooding his features. "I don't know where this goes," he admitted quietly. "But I want to try. I want to be better, for all of us." "One step at a time," Lily said, her own smile tender. And just like that, something unspoken settled between them. A bond. A shared truth. They weren't so different after all. Each of them was just trying to survive in a world that asked for too much. The following days carried an unexpected calm. Lily and Grace continued helping Jack when they could, sorting files, staying in the office a little longer, sometimes just keeping him company. The awkwardness that had once defined their interactions seemed to melt away. Jack opened up in ways no one expected, talking about regrets, fears, even pieces of his past. In return, the girls shared theirs. For the first time, it felt less like separate worlds colliding and more like one story being written together. For a moment, Lily let herself believe things might be changing. Jack wasn't the same man who had once walked past them like they were invisible. He saw them, respected them, trusted them. The bond between them felt fragile, but real. But reality has a way of crashing back in. It started with a phone call from his mother's doctor. Just a short conversation behind Jack's office door, his voice too low to catch. Lily and Grace were in the break room, sipping water, when they noticed the change in the air. The lightness Jack had carried the past few days was gone. When he emerged, his face was pale, his shoulders stiff. He avoided their eyes as he walked past, his hand gripping the doorframe a second longer than needed. "Mr. Mercer?" Lily called softly, concern filling her voice. He paused, turned, and looked at them. His eyes were glassy, distant. "I need to go," he said, his tone tight. "There's something I need to take care of." Grace stepped forward, her instincts sharper than ever. "Jack, is it your mother? Is she okay?" His throat worked as he swallowed hard. "I don't know," he admitted, voice cracking. "I need to see her. It's not looking good." Before either girl could speak, he turned and walked quickly toward the elevator. They stood there in silence, hearts sinking as the unease settled deep inside them. They had seen him vulnerable before, but never like this. This wasn't the controlled businessman. This was a son, terrified of what was coming. That night, Jack didn't return. The office emptied out, shadows stretching long across the quiet halls. Lily and Grace worked silently, but everything felt different, thicker, heavier, like waiting for a storm you couldn't stop. The next morning, they got their answer. Jack arrived early. His eyes were rimmed red, his face gaunt, his shoulders slumped. He walked past them without a word and closed his office door. The receptionist approached a few minutes later, her face drawn. "I'm so sorry to tell you this," she said softly. "Mr. Mercer's mother passed away early this morning." The words struck like a blow. Jack Mercer, the man who had been fighting so hard to keep everything together, had finally lost the one thing he couldn't hold on to. His mother's death shattered whatever walls he still had left. Lily and Grace stood frozen, their hearts aching. They had seen Jack strong, they had seen him vulnerable, but this was different. This was grief. Pure and raw. Lily's voice broke the silence. "I need to go talk to him," she whispered. Grace nodded, eyes wide and glassy. She didn't need to say a word. She knew exactly what her sister meant. They had lived lost, too. And sometimes, the only thing you could do was show up. Though they could never fully understand the depth of Jack's grief, the twins understood pain. They knew what it felt like when life slipped through your fingers no matter how tightly you tried to hold on. Quietly, they walked to his office, not sure what they would find. The door was cracked open. Inside, Jack sat slumped in his chair behind the massive desk, his gaze fixed on the wall. His hands were folded, his head bowed so low it looked as though the weight of the world had finally broken him. He didn't move when they entered. For a long moment, silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Lily stepped closer, her voice soft and trembling with concern. "Jack?" He didn't answer right away. But after a long pause, his voice came, barely a whisper. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to fix any of it, how to fix everything that's broken." The words shattered the image of the untouchable man who had built an empire with his bare hands. For the first time, Jack Mercer was completely vulnerable. Defeated. Lily and Grace stood on either side of him, unsure of what to say. They didn't have answers, and they couldn't repair what was broken. But they could stand with him. They could share the silence, share the pain, and remind him he wasn't alone. The air was heavy, Jack's uneven breathing, the hum of the air conditioner, the faint echo of footsteps in the hall outside. He was hollow now, a man who had seemed invincible, crumbling right in front of them. Lily's chest ached as she looked at him. She had never imagined seeing this side of him, the side stripped of ambition, stripped of power, left only with raw grief for the woman he had loved and lost. Grace, standing beside her sister, felt a sorrow so deep it almost frightened her. They had carried their own burdens, their mother's illness, the endless fight to survive, but what they saw in Jack was something else. Still, there was a connection. Pain leveled everything. It made them equals. Finally, Jack lifted his head. His eyes were red and swollen, his face pale. I don't know how to keep going, he said, his voice cracking. I've spent my whole life building this company, this empire. But none of it matters. My mother's gone, and I don't know how to find my way back from that. I don't know who I am without her. Lily's heart broke at his words. She knew that kind of despair, the kind that crushed your chest and made the future feel like it had been stolen. She had seen the way Jack carried himself, always hiding behind success and power. But now the mask was gone, shattered. All that remained was the truth. Jack, Lily said softly, her voice steady despite her emotions. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't have to fix everything today. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed not to know what comes next. His eyes lifted to hers, unreadable. But I can't fall apart, he rasped. Too many people depend on me. The business depends on me. I can't let this destroy everything I've worked for. Grace stepped forward then, her voice tender but strong. No one expects you to carry all of it alone. People may count on you, but that doesn't mean you can't lean on others. You have people who care about you, Jack. And right now, that's what matters. He looked at Grace, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Maybe it was vulnerability. Maybe it was the realization that he wasn't as isolated as he had always believed. His gaze moved between the sisters, searching, almost desperate to hold on to their words. I've always been the one holding everything together, he whispered. I don't know how to let go. I don't know how to trust anyone else. Lily reached out and placed her hand gently on his shoulder. You don't have to let go all at once. Just a little at a time. It's okay to lean on us. It's okay to trust that we're here. Jack's eyes shut tight as he sucked in a shaky breath. He was drowning in grief, responsibility, and years of carrying everything alone. But when he opened his eyes again and looked at them, something in him shifted. You're right, he said quietly. I can't do this alone anymore. I've spent so long trying to control everything that I forgot how to let anyone in. Relief flooded Lily's chest as she gave him a gentle smile. We're here, Jack. We're not going anywhere. Grace nodded, her voice warm and sure. We'll help you. One step at a time. Together. For the first time in days, Jack's shoulders lowered, the crushing weight lifting just enough for him to breathe again. He exhaled deeply, like a man finally allowing himself to stop holding everything up. I don't know what the future looks like, he admitted softly, his voice steadier now. But I want to try. I want to do better. I want to be better. And I want to do it with you. His words carried a quiet promise, not just to the girls, but to himself. The promise that he wouldn't carry the weight of the world alone anymore. In that moment, they didn't see a CEO or employees. They saw each other as people, wounded, flawed, but united. The walls that had once separated their worlds were gone, replaced by something built on trust, vulnerability, and shared pain. And they all knew, whatever came next, they would face it together. The following weeks moved with a gentler rhythm. Jack's grief didn't vanish. It was still there, woven into his days. But he wasn't carrying it alone anymore. With the twins' quiet support, he began to process his loss in ways he never thought possible. There were still difficult days, mornings when the weight of his responsibilities crushed him, nights when the emptiness was unbearable. But for the first time, he let people in. He reached out. He talked. He leaned on others. And he found connection in places he never expected. Lily and Grace changed too. They had never imagined finding someone who truly understood their struggles. But Jack did. Beneath the wealth and power, he carried the same quiet pain. He had shown them that even the strongest people could falter, and in turn, they became a source of healing for him. What began as a cleaning job had turned into something so much deeper, a bond built on compassion and trust. One afternoon, Jack walked past the break room and stopped in the doorway. Inside, Lily and Grace sat together, laughing softly about something only they understood. Their laughter filled the air like sunlight. It was such an ordinary moment. But for Jack, it was extraordinary. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed like that, or felt that kind of lightness. His chest tightened, swelling with something he couldn't quite name. Maybe it was gratitude. Or maybe it was something deeper, something that felt like peace, a kind of peace Jack Mercer hadn't realized he'd been missing. Lily caught his eye and gave him a warm smile. "You okay?" she asked lightly, but with genuine care in her voice. Jack smiled back, and this time it wasn't forced. It was full and real, brightening his face. "Yeah," he said. "I'm okay." It wasn't just something he tossed out of habit. He meant it. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt like he was finally starting to heal. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Doubt and sorrow still lingered, but he had learned something priceless. He didn't have to carry it all alone. Grace looked up from where she was sitting, her eyes thoughtful. "We're glad you're okay," she said softly. "We've got your back, you know." Jack nodded, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He had spent years building walls around himself, terrified of anyone getting too close. But now he realized those walls had only kept him from the one thing he needed most: human connection. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything. I don't know what I would have done without you too." Lily's smile softened. "You don't need to thank us," she said gently. "We're a team now. We help each other." Jack pulled out a chair and sat across from them. For a while, no one said a word. They didn't have to. The quiet between them wasn't awkward, it was comforting. They simply sat together, sharing something unspoken but strong. In the weeks that followed, Jack's life began to shift. His work no longer swallowed him whole. He started spending more time with Lily and Grace, not just in the office, but outside of it too. They strolled through the city, shared dinners, and had conversations that drifted from heavy truths to light-hearted laughter. The twins came to understand Jack in a way no one else ever had. And in return, Jack began to truly understand them. Months passed, and while the pain of losing his mother never disappeared, it changed. Jack realized healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant moving forward, even with the weight of the past still pressing on your heart. One evening, he sat in his office, watching the sun melt into the city skyline. The space around him was quiet, but no longer hollow. For once, he didn't feel alone. His gaze drifted to the photograph of his mother on the desk. A small smile tugged at his lips. She had always told him he was meant for more than just business, more than numbers on a screen. She had wanted him to find balance, to find people who mattered. And now, at last, he believed her. There was a knock at the door. Before he could answer, it opened slightly. Lily and Grace stepped inside. "We were wondering if you wanted to grab dinner," Lily said with a warm smile. Jack stood and walked toward them, his voice steady and filled with a calm he hadn't felt in years. "I'd love that," he said. The three of them walked out together, side by side, sharing a quiet sense of belonging. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But for the first time, Jack felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. They weren't just three people from different worlds anymore. They were a team. And for Jack Mercer, that was everything.